just wanted to say a few words ahead of this video because these videos come off the back of a huge lot of Eaglemoss Star Trek ships that I picked up recently. And so I've put up all the duplicates on eBay for you to have a look at, and I'll include links around and about the place. So if you've got any sort of interest in getting hold of a few of these to have a look at them for yourself, you can do so for a while at least, because it looks like they're not going to go flying off the shelves. I've tried to price them quite reasonably, so do please go and have a look. And without further ado, I will get on with the main video. Cheers. So, interesting factoid, we never actually saw a Vulcan mainline starship until Star Trek Enterprise. So, despite Vulcans being well established in the original series, because the original series didn't really do many ships at all, because models were expensive in the day and they didn't have the budget for it, it wasn't actually until Star Trek Enterprise, despite having had 7 years of Star Trek The Next Generation, that we saw a major Vulcan ship. And this is one of them. This is the Surak class. And these were really sort of quite big bruisers. And the Vulcans were amongst the most technologically advanced races active in the 22nd century at the time of Enterprise. So you can see just from the front cover, it's Warp 7 capable in a combat mode. But apparently the Surak had two distinct classes. One was very much a science vessel. One was more of a combat cruiser. So the combat cruiser could do Warp 7, whereas the more sort of reserved science vessel could do Warp 6.5 or so. But we've got particle beam emitters, we've got photonic torpedoes, and the class is Surak, and Surak was a sort of a figure in Vulcan philosophy, I think is probably the best description perhaps. And I believe he actually was in the original series. So that's what the ship class is named after. And the Vulcan ships are immediately distinctive because even the little smaller ships have this sort of circular warp ring. Now, I'm not quite sure what the sort of the overall logic and thinking behind that was, other than making Vulcan ships look like Vulcan ships. And it's one of those things with Star Trek, because it's a visual medium, they kind of want the viewer to be able to identify who's who just from the look of the ship. And that they achieved that remarkably well by making the Vulcans the only people who use a ring as their warp drive. So this whole sort of ring here is the nacelle, effectively. It's even only vaguely connected to the ship, which is kind of bizarre. It wasn't until Discovery that we saw detached nacelles. But the Vulcans were kind of doing it back in this time period. Well, this huge long primary hull, and the one sort of oddity on it is this sort of triangular pyramidal underslung piece of hull here, where the impulse engines are housed. So, this was way, way beyond anything that Enterprise could possibly handle combat-wise. And the people who the Vulcans were most in conflict with at the time were really probably the Andorians. And the Andorians had pretty decent ships as well, again, beyond Enterprise. And we can see here that the Vulcans have tractor beams. Now, although we were best buddies with the Vulcans, give or take, they did not share their technology with then Earth. So we were inevitably behind them in terms of overall capability. But as time went on, we did form this alliance. So here we have the very unusual sight of Andorians with Tellarites with Vulcans, and of course Shran there on the Enterprise NX-01. So the Vulcans were, a very powerful spacefaring race at this point in time, and they weren't emotionally guarded at this point, I think, if I'm understanding it correctly, because they are quite aggressive at times. And there's a slight sort of factional thing going on there as well. and there's a whole arc in Enterprise around that as a concept. So there's quite a lot of interesting Vulcan backstory played out in Enterprise, which, as I say, I'm not that familiar with. But seeing these ships for the first time, I mean, they are just, you can see from the images here, it's just really, really unusual hull design and warp design, all of which means you can immediately spot them. Apparently, the difference between the science and the combat vessels is that the combat vessels have a sort of a more copper look to them, whereas the science vessels look more like the Planethalf lander that we saw at the end of First Contact. So I guess it's a kind of a difference between a sort of a deeper brown and a lighter brown, a shinier brown. Kind of hard to tell the difference, I find personally. Slightly different windows and so on as well, apparently. Now this is quite an interesting section here. These are all the different variants that they tried out before they came up with the final version of the Surak. And at times they were sort of borrowing from the Planethalf lander. But they also, interestingly, borrowed from this ship. And this ship, you might have seen before, it's actually an early precursor. Well, I say it's an early precursor. It was one of the early options for the Enterprise's design. This sort of twin ring segments. And there's an image of this in the motion picture as one of Enterprise's precursor ships. So that's quite interesting. I quite like that as an idea. And there's that. There's the image here of it on the wall in the motion picture. And I have seen that before. In fact, I think you can get it from Eaglemoss as a ship design. So it is possible to get a model. And apparently, what they did was they started off with a fairly sort of basic CG model for the Surak, and then they beefed it up because they realised that they were going to be seeing more of it. And we do see the Suraks a few times in this series where, in particular, one helps an Enterprise shuttle pod get out from a comet where it's stuck and the NX can't pull it out with its sort of conventional grapplers, and the Vulcan ship just does it in 2 seconds flat with the tractor beam, just to rub in the fact that, we're not capable enough yet, basically, from their point of view. So it's definitely one of the more distinctive Trek designs. There's no two ways about it. And I don't know whether I particularly like it, if I'm perfectly honest. I guess I prefer my more traditional looking sort of twin nacelle sort of ships. I don't know, but it's definitely fascinating, as Mr. Spock would put it, undoubtedly. So there you go. Let's have a look at the model. I haven't actually looked at where it fits. Oh yes, that's right. Bottom of the ring section. Okay. So here it is. A normal tactic of putting it the wrong way around so it doesn't drop out on me. Yeah. Ooh, okay. Rule number 1: don't grab it by the wobbly ring. Grab it by the long spiky bit. So I'm just having a look here. So it is there's not a whole heck of a lot holding it in place there, it has to be said. There isn't a lot there. So you do have to be quite careful with that, because that is the only thing that is keeping it in place. In fairness to them, I think there is metal in here. That's a little, I'm saying that, it feels a little bit heavier than just plastic. So I think maybe they've put a little bit of a sort of metal base on it just to give it some more rigidity, given how long it is. So I'll pop that down there. Pop that out. Pop this out. So I think I have one other Vulcan ship, which is a smaller cruiser. And I think it's the... Apologies for the slight jump cut there. Ran out of phone space. This is just sometimes the way. So this is it assembled. I was just mentioning before, the only other Vulcan ship I think I have is a sort of the smaller cruiser, as compared to this is the Surak. I think it's called the Vulcan or something like that. But this is the Surak, and you can see that this is the stand fits quite nicely onto the warp drive ring there. I think I've got it pretty much straight on there. So it's an unusual looking ship. I can't say that I necessarily like it as much as the more traditional, sort of twin nacelle setups that we have in most of the other races. But as is often the way with Star Trek, being a visual medium, you cannot mistake this for anything else other than a Vulcan ship, because no one else has the warp drive as a ring. So in that sense, it makes great sense from a sort of sort of pictorial, cultural history kind of idea, I suppose, that this is the way that Vulcan ships look. And the other cruiser has a very, very similar design ethos as well. So ultimately, the Vulcans would share their technology with Earth and the Federation generally, but right now, they were keeping it all to themselves, and this is why their ships are that much more powerful than many other ships in the Alpha Quadrant at this point in time. So that's it for this one. So I've only got about half a dozen more of my duplicates left to work through now. Thank you to anyone who's bid on the auctions off the back of any of these videos, because they've done very nicely for me. Thank you. And of course, what I've inevitably done is ploughed some of that money back into buying some other stuff to show you. So keep your eyes peeled on the channel for more things in due course. Cheers for now.